The golden child is a classical role in the narcissistic family system, and it is also one which we try to oversimplify, which is unfortunate because there are actually lots of nuances to this role. It's not as simple as the golden child is the one who is the recipient of the narcissistic parent's attention and is favored by them. There are many reasons a child becomes the golden child. Could be gender, depending on the culture, and depending on the parent. A child may be overvalued simply on the basis of their gender. It could be birth order. This can be a bit all over the map, but often the oldest child, definitely not always. This again is going to come down to what is best supply for the narcissistic parent, but sometimes that eldest could get themselves into that role. Another is appearance, especially if the child resembles the narcissistic parent, or the child is judged to be very attractive in some way. And this may include things like weight and shape. Another thing that can make the golden child is skill sets. And these may include being a good student, being good at a specific subject area like math or science, having a talent like a sport, or being a gifted musician, for example, being a prodigy. Or that child is viewed as an heir apparent for some reason. Maybe they have skills or the gender, or say stuff like, I want to be just like dad when I grow up, or will behave as though they are really interested in a family business, or will want to take on a profession that the narcissistic parent values. The golden child may also be the child whose safety responses within the family system are the ones that work for the narcissistic parent. For example, the golden child's fawn response may be manifesting as, I want to be a doctor just like you. Or they may be willing to sit and watch golf or World War II documentaries, or go fishing, or be in beauty pageants, or go to flea markets all day, or do whatever is the thing that the parent wants, and trying desperately to either excel at it or just care about it. There may be structural issues. For example, the golden child may become the golden child in a blended family because they are the narcissistic parent's child from the prior marriage, and the other children in the family system are not biologically related to the narcissistic parent who's now their step parent. Or a narcissistic person who has had biological children with different partners may favor a child from one of those marriages versus others. And yes, in some cases, the golden child could be a stepchild that the narcissistic parent has no biological relationship with, especially if that stepchild sort of wins over or ingratiates themselves to the narcissistic step-parent. And being a golden child, while is not as harrowing, obviously, as being a scapegoat, or as exhausting as being a fixer or a peacekeeper, it carries with it a precarious price. That at any time, you can get knocked off that golden child pedestal. It is sort of silently and implicitly communicated that as soon as you are no longer in line with the narcissistic person's edicts, your crown can be removed. And that sort of hanging threat is how the golden child is often controlled, and at a nascent, silent, unspoken level that they could not even articulate. The golden child knows that once they stop being that perfect source of whatever supply that they are for that narcissistic parent, their privileged position will be gone. And there is another side to this. Not all golden children want to be the golden child, especially golden children who are empathic and agreeable and are aware of the differential treatment that they are getting. They may really love their siblings and feel a sense of guilt, shame, discomfort, and frankly, cognitive dissonance when they see a sibling being treated poorly by their narcissistic parent, or just see their siblings being stressed out by the narcissistic parent. And also, the golden child may have to endure the triangulation with the narcissistic parent sometimes telling the golden child some really awful things about their siblings. It can almost be treated as betrayal if the golden child gets too close to their other siblings. And the golden child may have the sense that the narcissistic parent expects them to be unkind to their siblings as a show of loyalty to the narcissistic parent. It's very much like the dynamic that we observe in cults, where the cult leader will require these demonstrations of loyalty and expect certain cult members to mistreat others to prove it. In some golden children, this can result in a lifelong sense of moral injury and guilt. There is an assumption that it is a given that golden children become narcissistic adults, that they are born and bred to be entitled and manipulative and selfish. This isn't true. I would actually say that most golden children do not become narcissistic. Now, of all the family roles, the golden child is the one that is most likely to end up there, especially if that golden child lacks a naturally agreeable temperament and they have inherited some of that antagonistic temperament. There are, however, a series of different paths that the golden child can take. First, number one, yes, golden childness can definitely be a prelude to adult narcissism. So yes, this is the one people expect, and it does happen, especially if that golden child has that antagonistic temperamental piece. This is often a child that did not face limits or consequences, didn't have to regulate their emotions, and were often enabled during their tantrums and learned that they could treat other people the way that they wanted. And they were told by their narcissistic parent that they were uniquely more special than any other child, including their siblings, and may have been socially overvalued or societally overvalued. For example, a golden child's son in a patriarchal culture. And they sort of copied or modeled their narcissistic parents' behavior, and they got rewarded for it. They may become grandiose narcissists, but, once we start talking about paths 2 or 3, the path to vulnerable narcissism for the golden child may also start to make sense. Some of you may have siblings who are this kind of golden child. You don't need to be Freud to figure any of this out. And interestingly, these golden children often remain world-class enablers of the narcissistic parent. They benefited from the parent and will often remain in alliance with them until the end of that parent's days, especially if the parent has resources of some kind, and frankly, even if they don't. They will remain a staunch defender of that parent and remain the golden child in perpetuity while shaming their siblings for distancing, disengaging, going no contact, or not forgiving that parent. The number 2 sort of pathway is the imposter. This is the path we often do not talk about enough, the imposter. For golden children, to a fault, they are told that they are perfect and wonderful and more special than other kids and just a chip off the old block. The problem is that there can often be that failure to launch for the golden child, despite the time and resource and attention put into this child. And this can become a painful reckoning around shame and, in some cases, entitlement. The shame piece is basically, well, I'm great. Well, of course they think that. They were always told they're great. So why isn't life working out? It may show up as early as high school or college, where things are feeling difficult or not going the way they want. They don't get the job, or they don't get the school they want, whatever. Or it may simply be that the golden child is doing fine, but feels like they don't belong or they aren't capable because they aren't doing as well as others or they aren't the very best. But there is a unique cognitive dissonance that comes from the tension between being told that you are special and things not going perfectly. And that sense of, I don't belong, I'm not all that, I guess I'm not so great. And in essence, the internalized shame of being the golden child is a form of imposter syndrome. And this actually happens more often than the golden child becoming narcissistic. Think about it. The golden child was basically told, you're better than your sister, you're better than your brother, you'll be one of the great ones. Or how's my number one? That kind of stuff is what they were hearing. For these golden children, it also feels as though the only pathway to love is to keep being the best and delivering on the expectations that the narcissistic parent has. It can set up this belief that if you achieve this excellence that is love, being what that parent wants is love, but also a nagging sense of, do I even belong here? I have talked with many people who took on careers that they had no interest in, going to medical school or law school or architecture school and not enjoying it. And folks, this stuff not only is expensive to do, it takes years off of a life and feeling like an imposter the entire time. But the silent contract with their family is, I am so proud of my kid. They're going to be a doctor, or they're taking over the family business. Oh, they'll be running Wall Street before you know it. The golden child imposter has been filled with the false self that the narcissistic parent demands. And this false self can be a driver of the imposter syndrome that can settle in for a lifetime. And even worse is when that sister, who wasn't the golden child, does better than them, that just makes it worse. The third is the grandiose, can't take an ordinary job golden child. After a lifetime of being told they are special and also wanting to prove themselves, but being too good to be ordinary, this can set the golden child up for grandiose expectations from life. They can't do some sort of ho-hum boring job waiting tables or an entry-level job. Oh no, they are special. So they want to come out the gate as the one, and will often veer into believing in their grand entrepreneurial idea, or assume that their song will hit the charts, or their influencing will make them a multimillionaire, and they're shocked when it doesn't happen. After a lifetime of being indoctrinated into their specialness, they were naive enough to believe it would, and when it doesn't, there can be a crash and victimhood. It's not unusual for these folks to bounce from thing to thing, idea to idea, startup to startup that never quite starts. This can be pronounced if they did have, for example, a successful entrepreneurial parent, which in a strange way can almost make entrepreneurship and having a big company that you start on your own, it can almost make it look easy or doable, because they saw it happen, and because the golden child was probably an actual child when the parent was getting it going, or maybe it was inherited. So they may, in some cases, have an enabling narcissistic parent who keeps throwing money at their pie-in-the-sky foolish ideas, or the golden child, who is often more grandiose than they are effortful, doesn't do the painful, brutal work that's required to get an entrepreneurial idea off the ground and raise the money. And they may even feel, like I said, entitled to luck and be a real jerk and quite defensive at their failure to succeed, but at the same time hold this tremendous contempt for having an ordinary job and working their way up. This group may be narcissistic, but not necessarily. They may simply be grandiose in an almost childlike manner, like, ooh, I really like eating pie, so I'm going to open a pie shop, and I'm going to have franchises in every city by next year, but they've never even turned on an oven. Pathway 4 are the anxious and morally injured. For some golden children, we see a phenomenon that frankly we can witness in cult survivors, a messy combination of moral injury and anxiety. As I said, many golden children, not all, but many, like, maybe even love, they really do love, genuinely love their siblings, and wanted them as their playmates when they were kids, and to be their friends as they grew up, and just to connect with them. And yet, that golden child has a sort of special alliance with a parent who is mistreating these very same siblings. The golden child can feel torn between their allegiance and love for the narcissistic, harmful parent and a sense of worry about their siblings. And this is a confusion that a child often cannot process. Some golden children pull on some fixer-rescuer features and may try to protect their sibling, doing the equivalent of taking some extra crusts of bread from the prison guard, also known as the narcissistic parent, and bringing them to their sibling, or reassuring their sibling and almost doing the exhausting work of soothing the sibling or simply protecting their sibling, but also trying to stay in the good books of the narcissistic parent. But over time, these split allegiances and the anxiety of living like this can leave the golden child not only with a sense of hypervigilance, but also a sense of global anxiety, a common feature of anyone who has a narcissistic parent, and moral injury, of not doing enough, of doing the wrong thing, of being affiliated with the harmful person, or actually feeling that they've done the harm themselves to these siblings. So back to that cult dynamic, which is what makes this issue so bad. In cultic systems, as I noted, the cult leader or leaders will really attempt to create shows of loyalty by pushing cult members to harm other cult members, and from a place of fear, delusional commitment, sunk cost, and social conditioning. Seeing others, the people in the cult are seeing other people do this too. The cult members may do things that hurt others in the group, get confidential information out of them, physically harm them, coerce them, manipulate them, isolate them. So when, and hopefully not if, but when a person gets out of the cult, they often collapse, now sort of aware of the terrible things that they have done or were in proximity to, and seeing it with clarity. The sense of moral injury, which looks a lot like PTSD, and other negative states like depression, severe anxiety, and utter collapse, is something like what some golden children may feel, especially if they finally understand what narcissism is and what the parent was about. Number 5 could be the fallen golden child. Pedestals are small and high, and it's easy to get toppled off. So if you were the golden child and finally made the wrong move, you didn't do what they wanted or be what they wanted, then you're going to get knocked down, and often in a shaming way. I should have known you were more like your mother, weak. Or I can't believe I did all of this for you to be nothing. It can be uniquely shaming, and you realize that the whole thing was precarious and conditional. Sometimes being a fallen golden child is a blessing, since you get to see it clearly and disengage from it. But it can also feed into the imposter dynamic. There can be some anxiety where you may seek out other pedestals, because being on a pedestal once felt like love. For example, in a new relationship or even in a job. Finally, if you had an experience of getting knocked off that pedestal and then attempting to climb back up, kind of think Kendall Roy on Succession, it can create a unique trauma bond that trails you well into adulthood as you go from F you to the parent to getting hoovered back in by that parent and believing that this time the pedestal will be safer. Number 7 is the vulnerable narcissistic golden child. Now, this is something that can happen if a few of these things happen. While the majority don't become narcissistic more than any other type, this is the role that is more likely to become narcissistic. Now, if on top of being the golden child, imagine you also have the experience of getting knocked off the pedestal or feel some shame at how you treated siblings and the imposter thing and the failure to launch and life not working out, well, this is a fast track to vulnerable narcissism, a lifetime of feeling as though they are on their back foot, feeling owed something because they were told they were special and yet it didn't work out. That imposter sense, that is something we do sometimes see in vulnerable narcissism. Maybe being in spaces where they may even posture as belonging, but knowing that they are out of their depth and the subsequent anxiety about it. So the combination of having been on the pedestal and no longer there, maybe even being treated with disdain by the narcissistic parent because they didn't measure up. Again, think Kendall Roy in Succession. They maybe even were replaced by another sibling. They feel stunted because they were told they are great and special and unique, and none of it is coming true. And there can be a real anger and frustration at not coming through after all they were told. They were so special. And then there's, of course, that imposter piece we already talked about, that imposter, boom, 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 that is so present for all vulnerable narcissistic folks. That's always there. Then throw in there all the shame and the not measuring up and some temperamental antagonism, and you literally have the recipe for vulnerable narcissism. As I was thinking about this video, I made a list of some really clear, vulnerably narcissistic folks that I knew. And almost every single one of them was a fallen golden child. Some were the firstborn son, whose younger sisters, who actually were scapegoats and peacekeepers and truth seers, actually ended up excelling and doing well. Some were golden children who always fought harder and harder to stay in the narcissistic parents' good graces, best schools, big jobs, but they were hot-headed and they carried this forever unprocessed rage and always blew up the opportunities they got. Some were never satisfied. They never felt they got what they deserved and lived in a chronically victimized state. Some found themselves having to manage and navigate addiction. Listen, none of the narcissistic family roles are good, and having a narcissistic parent always harms people, because even if the child from a narcissistic family becomes narcissistic, that is not a good outcome. Much as this personality style does do harm to other people, it is also harming the narcissistic person. And while the golden children may be vilified as the ones who had the easiest ride in childhood, it's all relative. And in some ways, the golden children often end up in a more mucky trauma bond with the narcissistic parent and family of origin, because they may reflect on resource that was put into them, have more so-called good memories to pull on, and more guilt. The scapegoats and invisible children struggle, but may, with therapy, be able to make more of a run for it. All of us who grew up in these systems definitely carry our burden of shame and anxiety and hypervigilance. And that includes the golden children. It may seem like they had an easier ride. Maybe in some ways they did, but ultimately, as you can see from those 7 paths, the story rarely ends well. Thanks again.